people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened. I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because
JD Vance did an interview with Martha Raddatz of ABC. They talked about the response that FEMA has had on the disaster in North Carolina. And then they go on to drastically talk about the situation in Colorado with the Venezuelan gangs that are affecting the community. Let's get into this. We're going to watch this clip and then give you a deep, good analysis and breakdown of this.
Well, Martha, what the president said is that fundamentally FEMA aid is distracted by going to illegal migrants. And by the way, good morning, and thanks for having me. We've got Republican congressmen who are on the ground who represent that area saying that they have to call the White House to get food and water to FEMA. I don't frankly think there's anything malicious going on here, Martha, but I do think that we've had an incompetent response to this particular crisis, particularly in Western North Carolina, which, to be fair, was hit harder than a lot of us expected it. But fundamentally, if you've got 6 days after the hurricane, the 82nd Airborne is still trickling in, I do think that we had a fundamentally incompetent, overly bureaucratic response to the hurricane. So what you hear from folks on the ground is they feel left behind. And Martha, we have to remember, of course, I know this area well. This is the Appalachian region of our country where people have felt ignored by their government for 30 years, and it doesn't help when you have a response to the hurricane that's slow, that's halting, and then you layer on top of it,
Senator Vance,
that has done a lot.
Senator Vance, I want to go back to
resettlement work.
This is a vital point here because a lot of the big cities, a lot of the urban cities in America actually get more of the tax revenue and resources and government benefits in these larger cities. And that's why typically when it comes to voting, you have cities like that actually vote for more benefits, more welfare, more government help. It's because they're actually used to that. And in areas where it's more suburban, like people are used to actually fending more for themselves. But then also what happens is, low amounts of resources actually go to these areas and people are given less help in situations in which they are needed more help because the resources are lower. Let's continue with the video.
Go.
I want to go back to what former President Trump said. He said they're going out of their way to not help people in Republican areas. There is no truth to that. And on staging, Pentagon officials say that active duty troops were staged and ready to go before being called upon and were instantly out the door. So President Trump, former President Trump, is saying things that aren't true about that money being withheld from Republican areas.
Well, Martha, I think you're actually confusing staging of resources from the rapid response of the U.S. military. I mean, look, in FEMA's defense, there are things after this hurricane that FEMA simply could not do. You actually need military command and control. You need military resources deployed to the area. And I think all the president has said is, frankly, what some of Kamala Harris's surrogates have said, which is that if these areas were a little bit more democratic, maybe Kamala Harris would have focused on them more. That acknowledgement is not to attack, frankly, the good folks of FEMA. It's to suggest that Americans are feeling left behind by their government, which they are, Martha.
Okay,
let the folks.
So this commonly happens all the time when Trump speaks. They purposely take out of context what he said in order to spin it in a way that makes him look terrible or bad. And again, the point that JD Vance just said that Trump had made in response to this situation is basically what I just said just now, which is in Democratic areas, a lot of times there's more focus, there's more resources, there's more finances and economic help being given towards these different cities, while in other areas, it's just not. these people are typically thrown to the wayside, resources are thrown to the wayside, and there's not a lot of focus on it. And that was more so, it appears, the comment that Trump has made. And it is apparent that the left is going to spin that out of proportion and out of context in order to make a more negative narrative. Let's keep watching.
On the ground, I've had friends that have been in Boone, North Carolina, helping with the cleanup. It is an extraordinary sense of betrayal and being left behind. People are worried that their government doesn't care about them. I'm much more worried about the incompetence of Kamala Harris's administration that led to that, more than
Senator Vance,
the fact that
Senator Vance, I'm just going to say that local officials and FEMA officials say that is just flat wrong. But I want to, we played some other comments about migrants, including in Aurora, in Colorado, where Trump said the city had been invaded and conquered by Venezuelan gangs. The Republican mayor of the city said flatly the city...
So obviously now what's happening is we're going to spin. She doesn't like the direction of the conversation in regards to North Carolina and FEMA. So now we're going to go ahead and spin the conversation into a completely other direction. But to her defense, she did say in the beginning that she wanted to talk about this as well. But what an opportunity, and what now the chance she's taking to now spin the conversation. Here we go.
And state have not been taken over or invaded or occupied by migrant gangs. So do you support Donald Trump making those claims that the Republican mayor says were grossly exaggerated and have hurt the city's identity and sense of safety? I understand what you're saying, that some people left behind, but he's making these statements that the mayor is flat out disputing.
First, before we get into this, let me say this. Anytime a city makes national news and it's negative publicity, a lot of times a mayor will get on TV and speak about the situation and minimize the results of what's occurring in order to not look bad on a national stage. The mayors will typically say, everything's fine, everything's under control, we have it all, don't worry about a thing, everything's gonna be all right, baby girl. And in actuality, no, everything is not going all right, and that's why your city's on national news. But nevertheless, let's continue.
Well, Martha, you just said the mayor said they were exaggerated.
Exaggerated.
There's got to be some. That means there's got to be some element of truth here. And of course, President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado, talking to people on the ground. And what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were...
So now, again, we're watching this live. She just now spun the conversation. She just said that it's grossly incorrect and it's not true. And then she used the word exaggerated. And he said, well, if it's not true, but then you say it's exaggerated, then obviously if something is exaggerated, it is true. It just might be spoken in a hyperbolic way. So which is it? Is it exaggerated or is it not true? Because exaggerated means that it's true. It just might be hyperbolic. But not true is not true. So what are you saying? And then as he starts to respond, common, classic, left-leaning rhetoric and behavior, the disinhibition comes out. Just start interrupting, start going crazy. Don't let him speak. I just asked him a question, but I don't care what he says. I'm going balls to the walls, left wing, uncontrollable emotions, speak over you, don't let you talk. I don't want to hear what you say. I have to spin the conversation in another direction. And granted, Destiny, the left-leaning commentator, Twitch guy, who's been on a lot of podcasts, I will say he's pretty smart, but he's a great spinner. As soon as you answer a question, he spins. And then you make a point, a small point, while trying to make a big point, he spins. And then he spins, and then he spins, and then he spins. And the next thing you know, you're 20 topics away from what you originally started talking about. Nevertheless, get back into it.
limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here. We've got to get American communities in a safe space again. And unfortunately, when you let people in by the millions, most of whom are unvetted, most of whom you don't know who they really are, you're going to have problems like this. Kamala Harris, 94 executive orders that undid Donald Trump's successful border policies. We knew this stuff would happen. They bragged about opening the border, and now we have the consequences, and we're living with it. We can do so much better, but frankly, we're not going to do better, Martha, unless Donald Trump calls this stuff out. I'm glad that he did.
Okay, let's.
So listen, the interview continues to circumvent in a similar manner. There's about 6 to 7 more minutes in that particular interview. You can go back and watch the rest if you want. But just as you see, the last part of that segment there is he goes in and he explains in a very transparent way. And the nitpicking that is done is saying that it's only a couple of apartment complexes in America that have been taken over, as if this isn't a large problem. They're minimizing the issue here. And if any parts or any complexes in any cities in America are being taken over by illegal immigrant gangs that have constructed small militias in which they are trying to take over in similar manners that they would do in their home country, where they go to areas and completely wipe out a building in a neighborhood, like something that would happen out of the movie of New Jack City. If you don't understand what I mean, go watch the movie and you'll see exactly what I mean. It's completely disastrous, and it needs to have focus, and it needs to be paid attention to. But what the left doesn't like is it feeds into the common issue that Americans have with the migrant issue. And they want to pull away from it because it makes them look bad, because the current administration, Biden-Harris, did a very, very poor job in taking care of the situation. And because of that, they look incredibly bad. So listen, I hope you liked that video. Make sure you like and subscribe. Also, check my podcasts out. I have more episodes coming up soon with special guests. Thanks for watching this video. Again, I'm Mr. Rembrandt, and this is Mr. Rembrandt.